So today we have the pleasure of Savannah and Alexa joining us and leading this amazing webinar on self-management and really looking at how can we help our students manage their stress. Stress is not a fun thing to deal with, and if we know how to deal with stress properly, it can help improve, hopefully, our lives. It can improve so many other aspects of it. So Savannah is our amazing instructor, as well as she's one of our advisory board members for ABA. And Alexa, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she is one of our guests. We are so excited to have Alexa join us today. So I will turn it to Savannah and Alexa. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I will be moderating the chat and the questions that come through.
All right. Hi, welcome everyone. Just to give you a little bit of an idea about your instructors today, I'll go ahead and introduce Alexa. She is a longtime friend of mine. We went to UC Santa Barbara together for undergrad, so we are both former gauchos. She lives in Los Angeles and runs her own private LMFT practice. She's also adjunct faculty at Cal Lu, teaching in their graduate psychology program. She has published several books, including the Positive Thinking Workbook, several self-care journal, and Optimists Live Longer.
And we have our lovely Savannah, who is obviously a former gaucho living in LA, and she's amazing. She leads a team of more than a dozen behavior intervention developers at an MPA and specializes working in supporting at school, in special ed students. And she has been a UCSB PACE instructor and supervisor since 2020. So it's awesome that we both get to bring in our knowledge from ABA and MFT and bring it together for you all and support you today.
All right, so we want to dive into our topic. We're going to talk a lot about self-management, and there's a couple different ways that you can consider self-management from an ABA perspective. So this really kind of starts, as many things in ABA do, with B.F. Skinner. In 1953, he defined self-control, or what we might now call self-management, as tactics that can be operationalized as a controlled or a controlling response. So you have to have both in order to have some kind of self-control or self-management. So at its root, we're saying a controlled response is the behavior we're targeting for change. So whatever this might be in terms of self-control, it's usually something we are self-identifying. Maybe you're saying, I want to change this habit. I want to drink more water. I want to get to sleep earlier. I want to finish my reports on their deadlines. I want to manage my stress. So that would be your controlled response, that behavior that you are targeting to change. The controlling response is the behavior that you can emit or engage in to control or change that target behavior. So if I want to have a controlled response of being more hydrated, my controlling response is to drink more water. So what is the action you can take to have that response? Some examples. I know that the gallon challenge is one that a lot of my friends follow through with. Drinking water. So the controlled response there is being more hydrated, and the controlling response would be tracking your water intake, possibly on your phone, or using a water bottle with a stimulus cue. We have an example up here. I know these are pretty popular now, water bottles that give you all kinds of positive reinforcement and different reminders and prompts throughout the day with the time. Another controlled response might be taking 10,000 steps a day. I know a lot of people are focused a lot on their physical health and want to make sure that they're active. So if you want to take 10,000 steps a day as a goal, you might use a pedometer or a smartwatch to track the number of steps you take. You might bring portable foods to walk with during your lunch break, or you might use a walking treadmill. These are all just some examples of controlling responses that can help you to reach that goal that you can self-manage 10,000 steps a day or more. I have a lot of other friends who are much better book readers than I. They have goals annually for how many books they want to read a year. One of my friends wants to read 52 books per year, so that's one per week, which is wonderful. And some ways that she has controlled that response would be tracking how many books she's read with an app, traveling to the library each week to pick up or return books, and then joining a book club with friends, kind of holding yourself accountable by engaging in other controlling responses that will help you to meet that goal. So self-control is really about breaking it down to what do I want to change and how can I change it? And that's what we're going to work on self-control and self-management of. So why is it so challenging to manage ourselves? There's a lot to be said for being able to say something, oh, I want to change this. I want to take 10,000 steps a day and drink a gallon of water every day and read a book every week. But it can be really challenging to do those things and really stick to those goals. If you've had trouble sticking to those goals, you are not the only one. This is something that everyone struggles with. That's why we have whole different types of, self-help gurus and books and things we can do. And people make entire businesses out of giving you things like those water bottles with those prompts on them. This is because people need support, people need prompts, and people need ways to help manage those responses. So one way we can consider this, which I think is a really interesting concept, is delayed consequences versus immediate gratification. So impulsivity is something we all deal with daily. Weak contingencies from a behavioral perspective or delayed consequences are not very motivating agents of behavior change. You can create what's called a reinforcement trap. So you can say, oh, I could get on the treadmill for an hour right now and help reach my goal, or I could stay on the couch and watch my favorite episode on Netflix. It's immediate gratification. It's much more fun to lay there and watch that video usually instead of getting on the treadmill. So that's that delayed consequence and immediate gratification. The delayed consequence of reaching your goal is not nearly as motivating.
That also makes me think about too, right? The intention behind it, right? What are we coming at this from a place of self-criticism, or are we coming at it from a place of self-compassion, right? And when we decide to bring in certain consequences, or when we look at the delay versus the immediate gratification, it's really coming from a place of, how do I want to nourish myself? How do I want to take these steps to really make sure that I'm thinking about the long run, thinking about these delayed consequences, because, it is an important piece of our health and wellness and our nourishment in our life. So kind of reframing it as, how can I take care of myself rather than being hard on yourself? Because, these things do take time to implement and strategy to implement.
Definitely. So some examples we have here, I know I should study for my final exam maybe 5 weeks before the end of term. I don't want to fail the course. That's a big reinforcer for me, is getting an A or getting a good grade. But taking the night off tonight to hang out with my friends is fine. I have plenty of time to study later. Of course, coming from a place of self-compassion, it is definitely important to take those breaks. And I think the real conundrum just comes between, do I actually have the time to take it off tonight? Or if this is the question I ask myself every day for the next 10 days, maybe perhaps I'm getting myself into a place of avoidance, and I'm avoiding this task that is more challenging or more unfun for me. Similarly, we would say one example would be like, I should not smoke cigarettes. I think especially in the United States and California, we have a lot of data and a lot of knowledge about how bad tobacco can be for you in the long run. Chances of cancer or death, which are big, big, big things that you would assume are super, punishing. You don't want to contact those punishers. It can be very easy, especially for someone who is, addicted to cigarettes or uses cigarettes frequently, to say, oh, just one won't hurt. Oh, this will be my last one. So even when you have a really big punishing consequence, something that could actually harm you as a person or potentially result in, a big term illness or death, it can be hard to see that delayed consequence versus the immediate gratification. So again, just considering that even big consequences, if they seem far away, might not be very motivating or very help you to be an agent of change with that behavior.
Yeah, and it makes sense considering where our brain is at in terms of evolution, because our brain is still actually only evolved to a hunter-gatherer society. So what that means is that immediate gratification, those immediate consequences, were ingrained to respond to, because that was survival for hunter-gatherer society. But now we're in the modern world, technology is here, and we're not in that type of world. Now we're having to manage all of these things that don't necessarily feel natural to us, right? That we have to think about these delayed consequences. And so it does take a little bit of, it definitely takes awareness and insight and intention in all of this.
So here is a cute video. You guys might have seen this one before. Just wanted to share it briefly. It is called the marshmallow test. So this is an example of what we might see in terms of impulsivity and delayed consequences. This is typically with kiddos. I'll let the video explain, but it's pretty cute.
The marshmallow test is a really great way to show how children delay gratification. We tried it out with the 4 children we've been following since September 2010, Alfie, Millie, Mackay, and Pratmesh. Here's how it works. We had each child on their own sit at the table at a desk with a plate and 1 marshmallow. They could either choose to eat the marshmallow, the 1 marshmallow right then and there, or they could wait until I came back into the room and have 2 marshmallows. I left them alone in the room for 15 minutes. Take a look. The marshmallow test has been used for decades by psychologists. It's been used with children to predict later academic success, including literacy, SAT scores, and other academic outcomes. There's no definitive answers from the marshmallow test. It's not a matter of passing or failing. What we're looking for is whether children can really resist this piece of white candy sitting in front of them that's sweet, that, the smell of it, the allure of the marshmallow. In Pratmesh's case, we really saw this added curiosity because he had never actually tasted a marshmallow before. All of the children managed to show some level of self-control and resist the temptation to eat the whole marshmallow. As you can see from the footage, you can catch a glimpse into children's ability to control their impulses. This ability, which is developed around the time of kindergarten, can be linked to other outcomes later in life. At the end, the marshmallows were in kind of different states. Some had been squished, ripped apart, nibbled around. There was this temptation and there was this impulse to kind of try it out.
So the marshmallow test is just a really simple way to conceptualize that impulsivity and the delayed gratification. Do I want this marshmallow right now, or can I wait 15 minutes and get double the amount of marshmallow? And that's really a great consideration of what is self-management and self-control. So what can we do to overcome this impulsivity? How can we all wait for that second marshmallow, so to speak, and really consider what our long-term goals are and how important they are to us? A quote from Dick Malott: the natural contingency between each response and its outcome will be ineffective if the outcome of each individual response is too small or too improbable, even though the cumulative impact of those outcomes is significant. So once again, even if that reinforcer, that punisher, whatever that consequence is, way down the line is significant, it can be really challenging to see the importance of each of those small steps towards that goal in the moment. So what we can do to really make this easier for ourselves is to strengthen those reinforcement contingencies for controlling responses, meaning once again, the steps we take toward those goals, adding additional reinforcement, making sure that we are very intentionally looking at what these steps are and seeing them as a step in the process instead of just something I have to do. Combating that instant gratification of bad habits or of doing the opposite or letting those fall by the wayside. So building those new patterns of responding so that those controlled responses become the norm. And then, just as we do with all of our other procedures, we fade those extrinsic reinforcers and they just become part of our habits.
So in all of this, right, and what Savannah's talking about is we're basically changing the way that our brain is functioning in all of this as well. The more we repeat something, the more that it gets normalized in our routine, the stronger that those pathways will fire in our brain and the more likely we are to act in that behavior. And so something we wanted to do is give you some tools to be able to use to help manage your stress and to be able to identify stressors and then work on coping with them in ways that will help change and shape your behavior. And so one of the tools that we brought in to help you start to identify stressors is a mindfulness tool. It's called RAIN. It's by Tara Brach. Tara Brach is huge in the Western mindfulness field. She has really great books on self-compassion and bringing in radical acceptance in our world. And so what the RAIN tool is, it's an acronym that you can use in these moments where you are starting to realize that maybe something isn't right. Maybe something's not feeling so good right now. And you want to think a little bit more about it. You want to gain insight into it. And so first, what you want to do is you're going to want to recognize what is going on. And that's kind of bringing in that present awareness in that moment of like, okay, well, what is going on? What am I feeling in my body? What am I feeling emotionally? Can I put a word to it? What am I also, what is happening around me, right? What's happening in my environment? Is there an antecedent there? What just happened that made me feel this way, right? So really just getting in touch with, okay, well, what is even happening right now? And then the second part is to allow this experience to be there just as it is. And I think this can be really hard because most of us really want to try and immediately fix it or push it away and say, nope, I can't be feeling this way right now, or, oh, I need to fix this. And that really gets us into a more self-critical mindset. It also can lead us to internalizing a lot of our emotions, which eventually is going to catch up with us. And so just allowing it, and typically what I say with my clients is breathing through it, just noticing, breathing through it and allowing your experience. And the next step would be to investigate it, right? And that's really thinking a little bit more about the larger picture. What is happening in my life right now? You know, we thought about the antecedent, but what are multiple antecedents that are in the context of this that are really impacting how I'm feeling right now? And you want to keep, what I always like to say is like a gentle curiosity around it. It's not that we're wanting to move away from like the self-critical, like, okay, I should change, I need to change, right? But rather, you know, well, how can I be curious about this? How can I bring in kindness that I would maybe use with another person? Or if you're working with children, I'm sure you use a lot of gentleness with the children you work with, right? So it's bringing in that curiosity and that gentleness. And then finally, nurturing with self-compassion, right? But also taking compassionate action, as I always like to say, which is a lot of those kind of tools that we'll be talking about after, but really diving into that, right? And so the goals are really, you're wanting to increase your awareness of these stressors, and you want to be aware of your nervous system's response, right? So when I talk about coming into your body, that's noticing your nervous system's response, because our nervous system is what holds on to emotion, holds on to trauma. And so by coming into that, we're connecting more with ourselves. And this can be scary. And I just want to mention, if you have a lot of trauma, connecting to the body can be really hard. So, you know, don't push yourself past the point at which you know, you're triggering yourself, right? I want you to make sure you're honoring your own system as well. And so just being mindful of that. And then the other goal being to externalize. So basically moving that emotion or that experience from inside to kind of like outside of ourselves, so that we don't end up over identifying with the emotion, which is basically this idea of like, if you tend to call yourself like, oh, I'm an anxious person, right? You make your whole identity about being anxious. Rather, we want to say, you know, yeah, I may be an anxious person, I may have anxious parts. However, that's just one part of me. That is not all of who I am. There are so many parts that make up who I am. So we would love to hear in the chat, what are some stressors that you encounter at work?
Can I and also jump in, like, what are some stressors that you guys experience as being a student at UCSB? Is it the final? It could be anything from like the final. It could be something as simple as, you know, family, you know, maybe there's, you know, you have a stressful family. So, you know, think about kind of what Alexa shared, like think about the stressors at school, at work, at home. So yeah, and I think Crystal, you had a question. I'm happy.
I know some of the students I work with share a very similar stressor to me. One stressor that I encounter a lot is deadlines. It can be really challenging, even for regular deadlines that I know I always meet, monthly meetings I have, recording lectures. I find that that can give me a lot of stress and anxiety, even though it's something I experience often. Looks like essays are another common one.
Feeling too busy. And, when I also, I'm a UCSB alumni myself too, and Savannah and Alexa jump in, but, some of those classes I took at UCSB, I'm like, man, this essay, like, I feel like what's the point in writing this essay? And so if you're taking one of those required courses, you may think to yourself, oh, do I really need to write a 15-page essay, right? Like that can be a stressor, especially if you can't quite relate to that subject or, content.
Yeah, I feel like those are ones that we can all relate to. I know the future is always kind of a question mark, and that can be really challenging, especially if you have goals, if you want to graduate from this program, if you want to find a job in a particular field. It can always feel insurmountable when you think about that big, big goal. So finding those controlling responses, those small steps, can be a really helpful way to mitigate some of that stress and feel like you're making progress, even if the goal seems really far away.
We have emails, stress me out. Emails do stress me out as well. And, the fact that you guys are able to share with you what stresses you guys is great, because we're able to identify those stressors, which is that step one. So I think we have about half an hour left. So let's.
All right, so we'll get moving.
Keep writing out those stressors, you guys.
Okay, so when we think about identifying stressors too, another a great tool that you can use is journaling or logging. And, this is all about finding what works best for you. So know that, if maybe more of an internal rain technique might be better, maybe for others, that kind of tangible writing it out or journaling may be more helpful. And so this really gives you the opportunity to really track your stressors, emotions, physical responses, and those consequences, right? So if you wanted to, you could write out the antecedent, right? What's happening that's causing this stress. You could write out then the emotion itself that's showing up, the physical responses that are showing up in your body, as well as the consequences to all of that, right? What ends up happening as a result of that. And again, I'm always going to frame things in self-compassion because that's just who I am, but making sure that we do use self-compassion in all of this, right? The goal of this isn't to write it down and be like, oh, like, what the heck, like, what am I doing? Like, and then being hard on yourself about it. It's more just to gauge where you're currently at. And we all of us are going to have challenges at times, right? And Savannah mentioned that a little bit ago, right? We all have these commonalities that show up in stress and in life and in work-life balance. And so, it's so I think meeting yourself where you're at is a huge piece in this, and knowing that, you're not behind. You're not behind in life. You're exactly where you need to be. And the more we can accept where we are, the more we can actually change, which it feels like a paradox, but it is actually true. The more we bring in that radical acceptance, the more motivated we're going to be to move forward, rather than getting stuck and feeling like a failure and then lagging on your goals, right? Like, it's actually through self-compassion and acceptance we're able to move forward and motivate ourselves. So the goals of this, right? Cultivating insight and well-being into your life, again, promoting this radical acceptance, as well as reducing anxiety, depression, and it also helps promote that emotional regulation via this awareness.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember. I know when I start journaling, I can be very hard on myself. It can feel like listing stressors is like a to-do list, right? Oh, let me write down all the things I didn't do or all the goals I didn't achieve today. So I think that it's really important to kind of reframe that mentally and find a way to look at your list of, okay, what is it that I want to work towards? What is giving me stress today? Going back to that, sitting with that stress and being okay with it. Saying this does happen, this isn't me, is really, really important. And it's the only way I think journaling can really, at least for me, work. If I make it a laundry list, it's no good.
So this is on polyvagal theory, which is basically this understanding of how our nervous system responds when we undergo stress or trauma, and why maybe we respond in the way we do. So it will help you all hopefully garner some insight into, why these things happen and why these things show up, and maybe help with that self-compassion piece of like, oh, okay, this happens to everyone because it's a natural part of our biology.
Polyvagal theory provides an explanation for some common symptoms such as chronic, persistent, and debilitating anxiety and depression by explaining how our nervous system is connected to our emotional responses. To help us understand the polyvagal theory, let me introduce you to our nervous system. Imagine that you wake up in the morning, get dressed, and make tea or coffee and get ready for the day. As you leave the house, you notice something on your arm. Your heart starts racing. You feel as if you cannot breathe for a couple of seconds. Is it a spider? Is it the scarf you're wearing? Should you just get on with your day? Should you be scared and scream? Should you slap your arm to get rid of whatever you have on your arm? Your nervous system processes everything that happens from the moment you notice something on your arm to the moment a decision is made about what to do. This decision will depend on a number of factors, including your past and recent experiences. So, if you are scared of spiders, or if you watched a movie about deadly spiders last night, or if you live in an area where there are poisonous spiders, your nervous system is more likely to react as if you are under threat. The autonomic nervous system is part of our nervous system, and it monitors and regulates the functioning of the visceral organs, including our heartbeat and our breath, and is a major contributing factor to our emotional state. The autonomic nervous system is formed by the sympathetic division, which mobilizes the body into action, and the parasympathetic division, which relaxes the body and talks it down when there is no danger and you are safe. Both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions are involved in how we respond to stress and survival behaviors. The autonomic nervous system has three basic states. Rest and digest state, which is controlled by the parasympathetic system, also known as the ventral vagal state. It is our state of safety, when we are grounded and can engage and connect with the world and other people. The fight and flight state is our survival response controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. When we are in this state, we may feel angry, raged, and frustrated towards something or someone, preparing us to fight with it, or we may experience anxiety, fear, and panic. Any of these responses prepare us for action, to either run away from the threat or to fight with it. We go into low levels of sympathetic activation every day. As we walk, as we work, we relate to people, and when we face daily common small challenges. In these cases, we generally move between the ventral vagal and the sympathetic states. And lastly, the freeze state, which is controlled by our parasympathetic system, although the role is different than above. It is also known as dorsal vagal state. It is an emergency state and our most primitive response. The purpose of this state is to conserve energy for the most basic functions. When we are in this state, we have a tendency to stillness and we may shut down completely, to sleep, repair, slow down, and recover to help us go back into action when we are ready to do so. The ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal states work like a ladder, where the ventral vagal state is at the top, the sympathetic state is in the middle, and the dorsal vagal state is at the bottom. Throughout the day, we move between the different states up and down the ladder, depending on what we are doing. When we are in a stressful situation and overwhelmed, we are likely to go into dorsal vagal state. When we are calm and we feel safe, we go up the ladder into our ventral vagal state. The three states have an important role in our well-being and survival. Our nervous system has an inherent tendency towards homeostasis and balance, so the state we are in helps us navigate and cope with whatever we're going through at the time. We involuntarily scan situations and people to determine if they are safe or dangerous, and we move up or down the polyvagal ladder depending on whether our nervous system detects cues that indicate that we are safe or cues of danger. People who have experienced trauma and difficult situations in their lives, people who grew up in environments where their basic needs weren't met or were abused as a child, are likely to spend more time in the dorsal vagal state, the freeze state, experiencing symptoms such as low mood, anxiety, social isolation, and feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. The good news is that we can retrain our nervous system to start noticing cues of safety around us and to reduce the reaction our nervous system tends to have in the presence of certain cues of danger, which are often related directly or indirectly to the trauma or difficult experiences we've had. One of the first steps is learning to identify the state we are in at any given time so that we can seek what we need to help our nervous system go back to a state of safety. There are strategies that can help you navigate the different states and give yourself what you need depending on the circumstances and your nervous system response. These strategies include adjusting your breath, your posture, your movements, and the information that comes through your 5 senses, but there are many more. So next time you feel anxious, angry, overwhelmed, or you just want to withdraw from everything, sleep, disconnect, and spend some time alone, remember that your nervous system is doing its best to get you through the circumstances that you are in. And also remember that giving your nervous system what it needs will help you go back to feeling safe and engaged with what's important to you.
Okay, so that gave you a little overview of how the nervous system works, and hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about why maybe your body or your emotions respond in a certain way. But the great thing is we can create that safety, and we can, in the video they talk about these safety cues that we can attune to that will actually help us regulate our nervous system.
I love that. I thought that was very, very cute. Nice way to get through those sometimes challenging topics. So one thing we want to do after we've done our journaling, we've used the RAIN method, we've started to figure out and identify some of those things that are contributing to our stress, maybe some of those cues of danger that we're maybe misinterpreting, or that our nervous system may be misinterpreting, or things that we want to adjust. We typically notice that these are things that we try to avoid. So in terms of the stressors that we talked about, quizzes, GPA, interactions with people, you might find yourself procrastinating or putting off those conversations or those tasks or activities that are punishing to you. Those are things that are kind of putting you in that stressful state and making you feel as if you just want to, completely avoid them. You might find yourself avoiding colleagues, conversations, or emails. I know I'll mark the same email as, mark as unread and put that off for another time. Those are kind of some of those behaviors you might notice yourself engaging in when you're seeing those stressful situations. Zoning out, or as we call it for our kiddos, engaging in off-task behavior. I know I might notice that if I have a deadline coming up, I will magically, mysteriously have my cell phone in my hand for 45 minutes looking at videos that are totally unrelated. I might find myself overwhelmed with the need to wash the dishes, even though there's no need to have that done. These are all different types of avoidance contingencies that you might notice when you're experiencing stress.
So when we talk about, starting to notice these things, gaining insight into it, right? It's important to think about, again, cueing into safety, and grounding skills are great skills that you can use to help regulate your nervous system in these moments. So when you're noticing you're avoiding, noticing that these responses are showing up, then you can take grounding skills and use them to help you regulate and then move forward in whatever you're trying to accomplish. So this is just one type of grounding skill. It's actually an acronym for a few, but just so you know, you can Google grounding skills and there's a million that are going to come up. It's really great. There's tons online. But this is a DBT, so dialectical behavioral therapy skill, and it's called TIP. And basically, what it's doing is it's getting you really in tune with your physical senses, your 5 senses, right? So the first, you don't have to do all of these at once, by the way, you can choose one, but one is temperature regulation. So taking a cold shower, holding ice, things like that can help really ground us because it gets us really into our body, what we're feeling, the temperature we're feeling. It could be intense exercise. So again, making sure, you're aware of your own physical limitations, but maybe doing some jumping jacks or hitting a punching bag or doing any sort of activity. I know for me, going on walks can be really helpful when I feel anxious. So it doesn't have to be anything super intense, but getting your heart rate up, that can also be helpful at times. Paced breathing. So for example, breathing in for a 5 count and then breathing out for a 7 count, or, there's different types of breathing exercises that you can do. So again, that's something you can Google and look into, breathing exercises, and see what feels right for you. However, maybe some of these, I know when I was really struggling with my anxiety in the past, breathing was something that would actually trigger me more to focus on my breath. So again, finding what works for you. Breathing maybe helps some people calm down and may not be for other people. And then the other one is a paired muscle relaxation. So that's tensing, holding, and relaxing your muscles. And you can do that through a body scan. So like starting at your toes and your feet and clenching and relaxing, and then your legs and going slowly up the body, tensing and relaxing those different parts of the body. So again, making sure that you consult your doctor if you have any medical conditions or you're unaware or unsure of how these things will impact you, but these are all great tools you can use.
I love those, Alexa. That's so funny. I feel like paced breathing is one that has really started to work for me more recently. I got into yoga for a little while and they practice a lot of breathing exercises. I noticed that when I did those outside of yoga, it helped me to feel really grounded as well. So different things work for different people.
And again, going back to journaling, right? So when we're thinking about identifying those existing contingencies contributing to stress, again, thinking about those antecedents, right? So tracking the frequency and the use, tracking the frequency of your stressors, but also tracking the frequency and use of your coping skills, right? How have you been coping? And have the ways you've been coping been helpful or unhelpful? Because I think a lot of times those unhelpful coping skills they are learned responses, and when we haven't had the support we've needed to use healthier coping skills. And so it's going to take a little bit of retraining to start to use those healthier coping skills, but it's also okay to hold compassion for those old unhealthy coping skills because they were there to help protect you in a time where you didn't have more support. So those were the things that were helping you get through, even if they were unhealthy. And then tracking your emotional and physical responses to the coping skills, right? And that can help you identify maybe if it is helpful or unhelpful. Also noticing judgment that arises in this process and attempting to use self-compassion through that, and really trying to get into a place of gratitude and what's called the wise mind, which is basically there's this researcher at UCLA, his name is Dan Siegel. He's like the head of their mindfulness psychiatry program at UCLA. And he talks a lot about using the wise mind, which is basically, being in this mindful presence mind rather than the mind of your emotions or the mind of judgment or the mind of self-criticism. So coming back into that wise mind in this practice. So it's also important to think about co-regulation, which is this idea that who we surround ourselves with and the energy of other people around us actually helps us either regulate or get emotionally heightened. And so this is really biological. So we have what's are called mirror neurons, which is basically we are drawn to and imitate other people's responses. And this isn't like a conscious thing. This is just something that naturally happens. And you can think about maybe if you've ever been in an argument with someone and you're going back and forth, and maybe it starts to get even more escalated because you're escalating each other because those mirror neurons are firing. Whereas if you can stay calm and the other person's maybe still frustrated, eventually they're actually going to calm down because you're not meeting them and escalating it. So having someone there to help you regulate can be really helpful, right? And this can be anyone. It could be your significant other, coworker, friend, pet. Anything can help you in terms of someone that you feel like is a safe person for you too, right? Not people that are obviously triggering to us. That's not necessarily going to help. And when you think about like your own how you can help other people regulate, right? So having a calm, warm tone, slow body movements, and then teaching or modeling regulation skills. So like doing a grounding skill together, maybe practicing paced breathing together. And then of course, seeking treatment if you find yourself continuing to struggle, because again, having this support is so helpful when we're struggling with these things.
So, of course, in addition to these grounding strategies, we want to just talk about developing those new contingencies. So when you're considering the coping strategies you've been using, what is helpful for you and what is not, finding ways to develop new contingencies, those controlling responses to get towards your bigger goal. And this is really helpful to do in a reflective time. This isn't necessarily something that you might come across and be able to work through when you're very stressed, but this is something where you might want to kind of reflect, look back at your journal entries, look back at those things that you've identified as your stressors and say, okay, I've noticed a pattern that when I engage in this coping strategy, I feel this way. And maybe that's not what I want to see in the future. How can I find different controlling responses? How can I work towards my goals? Set incremental, attainable goals, small baby steps, and find ways that you can make sure that you are reinforcing those. You want to establish maybe scheduled break times on busy or stressful days. I know when I'm looking at my weekly schedule, I can already tell you which days are going to be the hardest for me. I'll say, oh man, Savannah, what have you done? You've scheduled yourself back to back for 4 straight hours. And I know that those days are hard. So if I am just trying to push through it and say, oh, I should do it, or I should, honor all those appointments that I've made and honor all the time of all the people I've made appointments with, that can be a real time that I'm going to be very stressed. So if instead I look at it in the morning and say, oh, I know so-and-so has something going on, maybe I can ask them if we can have a 10-minute, we'll start 10 minutes later. So I at least have time to, run and use the bathroom or eat a quick snack. Or I say, okay, I know it's a really long day. I'm going to pack myself a lunch so that I know that I have a little bit of time here and I can make sure that I'm eating during that time, and schedule those breaks and schedule those moments of escape and calmness. Reward your progress, figure out what those break activities look like for you. Like Alexa and I were discussing, not everyone likes the same things. So consider, this isn't like a list. I know I talked with one of my teams recently and about how standard self-care things might not be fun for everyone. Like, I don't like putting on a face mask. Like the mud face mask, I hate the texture of it. I hate the feeling of it. It freaks me out. So that is not exciting for me. But I do love to take a walk. I do love to unwind with TV, putting on some old comfort shows and watching them over and over again. Having a cup of coffee or tea, hopefully decaf, if it's going to help you unwind a little bit. Spending time with family and friends and those supportive people, the people who are your safe person, who help you to co-regulate. Taking a bath is one that I really love, or lighting a candle and finding a way to relax. So consider, what are those break activities like for you? When you're feeling calm and relaxed, when you're experiencing those great moments, what is it that you're doing? When are you the happiest in your day? When are you feeling the most at peace?
And I just want to normalize too, for people who have gone through a lot of trauma, it may be hard to relax. And that is a trauma response in itself, because when we're used to our nervous system constantly being on edge, to not be on edge feels unsafe in itself. And so I want to normalize that. It can be hard for some people to sit and rest. And that is something that takes building safety around too. So just in case you're like, oh, I can't even do that, just know that it can and will get better. It just takes practice and building your own tolerance around it.
So when we develop new contingencies, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. Alexa, why don't you take this one away?
Sure. Yeah. So we want to really think about too, right? Neurodiversity. We want to think about how people are different in how their brains work, right? So when we talk about neurodiversity, we can think about, people who are on the spectrum, or people who are challenged with ADHD, or things like that, right? And it can make tasks more difficult to complete for some people. And yet in society, these things are maybe considered easy to complete, because for people whose brains respond in a neurotypical way, they are less challenging for them. And so just remembering to honor your own diversity in that sense, like if you are neurodivergent, like it is more challenging, and that's valid. That's not a choice. That is actually, your brain just functions differently. I know I have ADHD, so things that can be challenging for me, like cleaning up, for example, is like one of the things that is really challenging for me. And I used to be so hard on myself about it, because I was like, this should be so easy. And yet for some reason for me, it's not. And it wasn't until I was able to hold a lot more compassion for myself that I was actually really able to start managing it better. Also honoring racial and ethnic diversity, right? So thinking about how there are larger systemic injustices that are impacting, people of color, as well as other, marginalizations. So when we think about like disability, socioeconomic status, et cetera. And so there are people who face additional stressors. And so just being mindful of that and how that impacts you or the people around you, because those large systemic injustices really do have a great impact on mental health. Additionally, socioeconomic marginalization, are you even able to access typically priced mental health care? I mean, unfortunately, it is expensive in this world to receive the care that we need. And so, I think the great thing is that there are resources out there. They can be challenging to find at times, but there are resources out there that are lower priced mental health care, such as community clinics, training centers at schools for mental health therapists, things like that. There are access to really lower cost care. You just have to know about it, which is like the hard part. So we are going to have some resources at the end for you all as well. But prioritize ways that work for you. More structure may be necessary than for other people. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So take time to find supports that honor, understand, and validate your unique challenges. And you're welcome to reach out to me if you need specific resources.
So while I'm going to bring up the resource slide so everyone can take a peek. But while we're doing that, please drop a response in the chat. Were there any strategies that we discussed today that you think might be helpful for you? Or if there's other ways that you de-stress, different coping skills or controlling responses, please let us know. And then here are our resources as well.
And I know UCSB also has a great, they have like a great center. So if you guys ever need support, you're stressed out, you can always reach out to UCSB. We will send a follow-up email with all of these resources, as well as UCSB's kind of help center if you guys do feel stressed out. But to kind of wrap it up, I think Savannah and Alexa touched upon a lot of great things. And please, I'm summarizing and paraphrasing what you guys shared over the last 50 minutes. It seems like, we want to make sure that you guys are able to like kind of recognize what are the things that are stressing you guys out. Look at how can I change that environment. Consider maybe jogging, writing things down, self-managing, those types of components. There was another thing you guys said, look at the different DBT skills that you guys have, that Alexa kind of touched upon. Not all of those skills will work for everyone, but find something that works for you. Like Alexa said, for her, breathing exercises did not work, but for Savannah, that's a great tool. So trying to figure out like, what are those things Savannah mentioned, figuring out other contingencies, like whether it's giving yourself a 10-minute break, maybe it's setting something up like, okay, if I complete my essay on time and submit it to my professor in a timely manner, then I can go, out with my friends for a fun night out, setting up contingencies that you can kind of access, something that you can access quicker, and then maybe like a long-term contingency. Did I miss anything, you guys?
Not that I noticed. Just in general, setting up new contingencies and figuring out what works for you, continuing to check in, I think, and making sure that whatever you're trying is helping you in the long run, and noticing if your emotions are out of line with what you expect. Maybe you think, oh, if I do this, I'll feel great. And you notice that you don't. Continuing to come back and check in and start that process over again.
And I think the hardest thing about all of this is we're sharing all these resources with you guys, all of these strategies, is actually trying it. And my recommendation would be to try it out for at least 2 weeks. The quarter just started, right? We're in week 1, so try it out for 2 weeks. And if you're like, wait, I really like going on walks. I know if you're on campus, if you live nearby, UCSB is a gorgeous campus. There's lots of great little walks that you can do on campus, or even nearby. So, walk on the beach. You're not going to have that access once you leave the amazing Santa Barbara area. So definitely, consider some of those strategies in terms of, okay, maybe I need a break, so I need to take a 10-minute walk, or, hey, I'm really feeling stressed out. Maybe I just need that 10 minutes to watch, a little funny video to de-stress myself, and, give yourself those opportunities to strive for that. And then I would say set a timer, because for me, the hardest thing is, it's been 10 minutes already, right? The funny thing is, when we engage in things that are so pleasurable, why does time go by so fast? But oh man, writing that essay, having those difficult conversations with peers, that feels like that 10 minutes feels like it's going to take 2 hours, right? So set those timers so that you can get back on track in terms of being able to complete the tasks that you have set yourself. I think that was it then. We will be on for the next few minutes. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know the quarter just started, but hopefully this was helpful, and we will definitely share the PowerPoint with you as well as the resources. So yeah, be on the lookout for that email.